The biggest thing out of that press conference is that Special Envoy Witkoff and Ambassador Mike Huckabee not only talked to Netanyahu, but are going into Gaza tomorrow because the priority is food. So yes, there's a, Donald Trump can be divisive. There's a lot of sometimes nonsense that comes along with it, but look at the outcomes. And you have to say, if you are in Gaza and hungry tonight, that one development is a good thing.
Now, let's just hear this first. Just throw this in because this really caught my eye earlier. How the US State Department this afternoon announced sanctions against members of the Palestinian Authority and the Palestinian organization, accusing them of supporting terrorism and seeking to destabilize peace. Well, I put all of this to the foreign correspondent Tim Marshall, who talked about why America might have chosen to do this now.
Earlier in the week, Mr. Trump said he was quite relaxed about the UK's intentions, but then he lashed out against the Canadian leader because Canada's going to follow suit. Either he is relaxed about it, or B, he absolutely hates it, wants to smash the window shut and make sure there isn't ever a two-state solution. But there is a third scenario. It is the third possibility that Trump just wants to sideline everybody else and make sure he runs the show. But what he has done either way is undercut a lot of the efforts that have been made this week.
Now, I spoke then to Yotam Confino, the journalist based, he was just north of Tel Aviv. He had a lot in common with that view. Just have a listen.
Well, Trump, he knows that the Palestinian Authority can barely control the West Bank. The areas where the Palestinian Authority is supposed to be in control, such as Jenin, they've been left for terror groups to do whatever they want. So he does not want to see another failed project with the PA failing to have proper law and order in Gaza. I think that's why he's now saying, you know what, guys, this is not the direction we're headed in. We're going to do something completely different. And he is very unorthodox in the way that he does things. And I believe that he probably has an idea of how he wants Gaza to be run and how the Israeli-Palestinian conflict should be solved, in his view.
All right, so that was the view of Yotam Confino, and we're joined now. We can all of us, Anna and Matthew, talk to our next guest, who is Matthew Bartlett. He's a Republican strategist who served in the State Department during the first term of Donald Trump. Welcome to you, Matthew.
John, my friend, good to join you. It's Matthew, good. Anna, hey.
It's great to have you here. Matthew, look, just give us your take on what's been going on today. The president left Scotland a couple of days ago, seeming quite, sort of telling Keir Starmer effectively, get on with it. If you want to recognise Palestine, I don't have a view on that. And look at what happens now. What are your thoughts?
It continues to be a very delicate and even volatile situation here. You have Macron saying they're going to recognize Palestine as a state. Keir Starmer may be inclined to do so. You have Carney up in Canada. But you can print that out right now. And no one is going to eat in Gaza right now because of that press release. So that does not affect anything on the ground. I thought it was striking yesterday. President Trump, was asked about it and said, I think this would be a reward to Hamas and their actions on October 7th if they somehow came out on the upper end of this because of their actions, and said that his focus was on, quote, getting food into Gaza. So I think that's a good priority right now. We have a war that has now gone into a massive humanitarian crisis on top of that. Again, complications. You saw sanctions on the PLO, around the pay to slay, around textbooks and education. And then also worth noting is that Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and Egypt all yesterday said that Hamas should disarm, should release the hostages, and should leave Gaza.
Yeah.
So again, this is a very complex situation where arguably you need people fed immediately, which will hopefully provide for security.
Of course. And the question about statehood and so on, it does seem on one level so academic compared to, the sort of people starving, suffering, the killing that continues to go on in Gaza. But for the longer term, this stuff is relevant. I mean, do you agree with the analysis that we've been hearing this afternoon by some, that Donald Trump simply just wants to be in charge of the process? When it comes to deciding the long-term future, he wants to be the guy calling the shots. I don't mean ruling the Palestinian territory, by the way. I mean just governing the plan.
Yeah, I mean, let's just be clear here. Yes, the president routinely speaks about the devastation in Gaza, is speaking about the pictures of starving children. So the upside, if Matt, you mentioned grace in politics, is that this is he actually cares. This is him at his most human, and trying to find a solution to just a long-standing problem. I'm not sure. Again, the rhetoric, some of the decisions. Ultimately, yes, the Palestinian people need to be in charge of their own destiny.
Yeah.
And hopefully that would be without Hamas. But yes, the president cares and is trying to play the appropriate role.
Yeah, well, certainly without Hamas, but on every plan that's been thought of so far, some sort of role for a Palestinian Authority. Yes, after an election. Yes, after it's been reformed. Yes, after the issue of corruption and trust has been, if possible, restored. But the Palestinian Authority.
Yes, they are, still a very weak and fragile government entity that it's unclear whether or not they can, guide the people moving forward here. And you just talked about Donald Trump being unorthodox. That is very true. Incredibly true. You talked about how he is using, trade and negotiations, economic diplomacy. In some ways he is transactional. War is bad for business. He sees not just security, but prosperity, possibly for the Middle East. This could be a new day, a new dawn. You have Iran, incredibly weakened. You have new allies that are ready to stand up. But the crux of this is solving the issue in Gaza,
yes,
which has gone from a war to just a humanitarian crisis.
Okay. Matthew, what do you think?
Yeah, so I mean, look, I'm interested to hear my fellow Matthew say that he thinks that the president really cares about this. But then I'd say, if he does, why is there this lack of consistency? We've seen him sitting next to Keir Starmer in Scotland, effectively, and certainly not contradicting the Prime Minister, and then the Prime Minister coming out on Palestine just a day or so after that. Clearly, that was discussed when they were in Scotland behind the scenes. And yet, when Carney does it in Canada, who's his bête noire, suddenly, all bets are off and the position seems to change. So I think the thing from this side of the Atlantic is the lack of consistency is what really confuses us, at the very least, if I put it politely.
Yeah, what do you say? American Matthew?
Again, the president, I'm not sure, had differing messages around Palestinian statehood. I think, he has always stressed that would be a reward to Hamas, and that this is not the appropriate time. And how that goes from here, we will see. Again, the president is a rare bird in American politics and certainly on the international scene. What I did think was interesting is, again, him pressing for not just recognizing, but saying yesterday that his focus would be on that. I think that's appropriate. So again, you can talk all you want about, in September, I'm going to go and put out a press release. Fantastic. No one is eating tonight because of that press release. It is almost shameful that is their position, in terms of rhetoric versus reality. So again, you have a very, very hard situation. That at the very least, the president is trying to negotiate with neighbors in the region. They're not calling for statehood. They're calling for Hamas to leave right now. They're calling for a release of the hostages, and they're calling for, them putting down their... Arguably, if that were to happen, that would have a much better chance at peace. And again, feeding babies right now. So this is a very difficult situation, long-standing, and you now have an American president that is certainly taking a different approach that could lead to a different day.
And feeding the babies, Matthew, is obviously the number one priority right now. And whatever the Israeli government may say about propaganda and the like, we've heard it day after day after day, people are starving in large numbers in Gaza. Is it not within the power, Matthew, of the president to put more of the kind of pressure on Benjamin Netanyahu that might result in more aid getting across the border and getting to where it's needed?
Listen, very possibly. Unfortunately, food is a disgusting weapon of war, and you can blame Hamas, you can blame Israel, but regardless, no one is eating tonight because of your blame. Right. So yes, it's maddening to see trucks lined up on, you applaud, I believe it's Jordan and the UAE for some of their airdrops. It is an incredibly inefficient, sometimes even dangerous way of getting food in there. You have seen pictures of trucks. It is not easy to do any of this stuff, but it is absolutely needed. So yes, I would think more pressure, and whether it's the UN, whether it's Israel, whether it's, ensuring that people get fed needs to be the top priority. Again, this has gone from a war zone to a humanitarian disaster. Hopefully good people, no matter where you are, no matter what your perspective, can agree on that.
I don't know.
Matthew, I'm interested in your perspective on some of the analysis of Keir Starmer's position in terms of the pledge to recognise Palestine by September, with certain conditions on Israel. That is seen by members of the government and the Labour Party as an effective tool to put pressure on Donald Trump. That's part of a strategy to put pressure on him, along with President Macron. Now, do you think that's all wishful thinking? Do you think there's any chance that Keir Starmer could be putting pressure on, has successfully put pressure on Donald Trump? Or do you think that Donald Trump is just playing a different chess game, to use the common analogy?
Again, we talked about coming in good faith and grace. I think Keir Starmer, again, may have different politics or visions than Donald Trump, but they have a personal relationship, and I think issues can supersede that. I'm not sure that it is pressure or cornering. I think it's two leaders talking in trying to talk in reasonable ways about a very difficult situation, and the notion of this may be advantageous in order to get this result versus statehood should not be a bargaining chip, and you should not reward a terrorist group in doing so. So diplomacy is a delicate mix there. And at the very least, again, the ultimate goal there tonight, and then the long-term goal of peace and stability, and having the Palestinians in control of their own destiny in peace with their neighbors. That's the ultimate goal.
I mean, Donald Trump, Matthew, when you see the way that he's, changed his tone, his pitch on this subject, the way that he's now sounding much more clearer about saying that something's got to be done to ease the issue of starvation in Gaza. He's clearer on that. He's louder on that than he's been than almost any time. What do you attribute that to? Is it swinging opinion in America? Is it some of those around him? Is it his wife? I mean, what do you think has led to this?
All of it, and maybe none of it. This is a president who campaigned, led the Republican Party, which invaded Iraq in 2002 under George Bush, and said this was a stupid war. We're not going to do this anymore, and changed the Republican orthodoxy on international intervention, especially militarily. So he's always routinely talks about either casualties on the battlefield in Ukraine, the pictures coming out of Gaza, meeting with hostages, the family of hostages in Israel. He is tactile in that. Again, it is at his most human. And then he is also, there are reports where he will go around and solicit ideas from everyone in the room and get to the last person and say, what do you think? And the person says, well, I'm the note taker here. And he says, well, what's your take as well? Whether he's talking to friends at Mar-a-Lago, whether he's talking to, policy people, he's always trying to get information. And certainly, as we've seen here, it seems as if the situation with a lack of food in Gaza has changed dramatically. So too has the president. So he is responding to a real world politic that is not easy. Not easy. We have allies, we have atrocities, and it's hard to navigate.
It is sometimes said that the most influential person when it comes to Donald Trump is the last person he had a conversation with. I don't think that's quite what you meant there when you said that. Now, let's just pick up one or two of the threads that we heard there from the White House briefing room. Matthew Bartlett, I think, still with us, formerly of the State Department. Matthew, hi, you still there?
I'm still here, John, yes.
Yeah, I mean, how did you enjoy the drum being banged for the president receiving the Nobel Prize like that? It can't be called subtle. How did it strike you?
Reminds me of when Barack Obama got the Nobel Peace Prize for merely existing or maybe winning, was preposterous. You would think Donald Trump should be told to be, humble. No, he's the opposite. He's braggadocious. What's the point of winning and doing things if you aren't getting credit? He's talking about the ballroom now. Yes. Of course, the developer, the pomp and circumstance. Maybe we can blame you all in the UK because he loves that so much. So it's been 10 years. I think we're routine to this. But the biggest thing out of that press conference is that Special Envoy Witkoff and Ambassador Mike Huckabee not only talked to Netanyahu, but are going into Gaza tomorrow because the priority is food. So yes, there's a, Donald Trump can be divisive. There's a lot of sometimes nonsense that comes along with it, but look at the outcomes, and you have to say, if you are in Gaza and hungry tonight, that one development is a good thing.
Yeah, well, to Anna.
Well, Matthew, I just wanted to jump in because I thought you spoke very, emotively earlier about the hunger in Gaza, and I just wonder if, people who see those pictures and have a similar reaction and view on it, when they see the words, that the pledge that Steve Witkoff and the ambassador will go tomorrow. I mean, why tomorrow? Why not today? Is there enough urgency here?
Listen, I mean, I'm not sure. Listen, their trip is important. I'm not sure what the time zones look like versus today, tomorrow. This is an immediate trip, right? They went there. He flew immediately to Israel. He had a meeting. They just reported out. And the priority, as you heard from the secretary, even yesterday, is to getting food in there. Donald Trump, we can have criticisms all you want, fair criticisms, whatever. I would think this is a good thing, right? Let's look at the outcomes, but it's hard to not say that, again, if you are hungry in Gaza tonight, that is welcome news.
Yeah, I guess it's got to be said that so far nothing has happened that wasn't happening already in Gaza. It may turn out that things improve. It may. I think we're expecting the Witkoff meeting to maybe end in some sort of cooperation on a new means of distributing aid, not just leaving it to the Israel-US agency, which is doing it at the moment, where we've seen just in the last 24, 48 hours, 30 people, 50 people shot queuing up for that food. Now, maybe there will be a way to distribute that food without that kind of appalling loss of life and shooting of people in desperate situations. But the proof of that pudding, Matthew, is going to be in the eating. It's a bit too early to celebrate.
Yeah, of course, yes. No, this is a war and a humanitarian crisis. Very hard to celebrate anything. But again, I would stress that this is a step in the right direction. You have a president that is putting priority, attention, certainly personnel, and hopefully resources behind addressing starvation. Yes, this is basic. It is not a celebration, but it is a good thing in the right direction that will hopefully produce better outcomes. Tonight, for those who are hungry, and then for, again, stability, peace, and prosperity. This is the arc that we are on, knowing that nothing is easy.